Good evening, everyone. So tonight, as we usually do every second Monday of each month, we have our meeting in English. So welcome everyone for our monthly meeting in English. And before we start, as we usually do, we do our initial prayer, then we will follow with a brief session with a comment on the book Our Daily Bread. Tonight, Juliana will be here again to speak to us about chapter 94. And after that, we will have the main topic of the night, which will deal with the item number 24 on chapter 4 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, which is limits of incarnation. So, but before we start, we will do our initial prayer so that we may focus even more, trying to reach the good spirits, the spirits who are always guiding us, and especially the good spirits that prepare this environment, this place, our continuing Luis, for every meeting that we are here, by saying, Dear Master Jesus, our brother, our friend, our guide, and our master, we would like to thank you for once again providing us the warmth and the comfort of a place where we can gather around your name, around your teachings, so that we can allow those teachings to come inside of ourselves. Please allow us and give us the blessing of understanding so that the words and the feelings that are said and that are felt here tonight may really touch our hearts, touch our souls, so that we may want to practice them in our daily lives. May these blessings fall upon us, not only the ones who we can see, but also to the ones who already passed away, but they are still here around us always, and also learning from you and from the missionaries of the light that are always surrounding us. May your peace, your love, and the love of God be with us not only now, but always. So be it. So, as I said in the beginning, let's welcome Juliana. She will come to read and explain a little bit of chapter 94.
Good evening. So chapter 94 is quite the themes about sex. From Our Daily Bread by Francisco Cândido Xavier and by the Spirit Emmanuel. As one who loved the Lord Jesus, I am fully convinced that no food is unclean in itself. But if anyone regards something as unclean, then for him it is unclean. Paul, Romans chapter 14, section 14. When Paul of Tarsus wrote the observation to the Romans, he was referring to the nourishment that at that time created harsh discussion between the Gentiles and the Jews. As time went by, food ceased to awaken dangerous discussion. However, we can use the argument to project it on other sectors of false opinions. Let us refer, to instance, to sex. No other area of activity on earth suffers greater treachery. Profoundly blind of spirits of individuals in general fail to discover in it one of the most sublime motives for its existence, the most exquisite achievement in the planetary struggles as the uniting of the souls for motherhood and fatherhood, the creation and the reproduction of all the forms, the extension of life, and a beautiful stimulus for the work and the regeneration that were made possible by the Father to his children by means of sexual emotions. However, the individual spoil and lessen the saintly peace populating its altar with the phantoms of excess. Sex established the home and created the name of mother, but human selfishness exchanged it for the absurd of animalistic experience, thereby initiating cruel trials for itself. The father offered a sanctuary to his son. However, their lack of comprehension constituted as an offering of their part. It is due to his that painful, distressing romances have existed in all continents of earth. And still, in spite of being submerged in deplorable deviations of individuals ask for sexual education, insisting on programs which could be useful, but only when its saintly notion of divinity, of the creative power, it is spread throughout. As long as filth still remains in the heart of he who analyzes, or in the heart of he who teaches, the methods will not be other than the same luminous. So this is a very, for some, I've actually did a research in this reading, and it's quite one of many controversies because it can divide a lot of opinion by what Emmanuel is saying here. What Emmanuel is saying is that sex is only negative to those who see it that way, and he uses the quote from Paul, where at the time Jews saw that food had to be purified before it could be eaten, because they saw it was unclean. But what Paul is saying is that it's only unclean to those who sees it, the same way that sex is, that we see it as well. Sexual activity is actually, what Emmanuel is saying, is a beautiful act because it's the start of reproduction, is the start of motherhood, the father, and the home, and the start eventually of the family. So it only is a negative thing when you see it, because if you come from a place that is negative, that only shows not the positivity of why we are put in this world to be reproductive beings, then it's an act that only is going to be negative in the hearts of those who sees it, but not really what it really is. Thank you all.
Thank you, Juliana. This is, like I said, it's usually a very brief comment, and that was so, but it is really important for us to think about it. And if you want to go and take the text and read it again, because it is important for us, not only, and that's one of the major things about Spiritism, is that the topics that we study here, that we talk about here, they are not for us just to take the word of that person that's speaking. Juliana did something that's really interesting, which is she read the text and she researched on the topic. And when we come to a Spiritist center to listen, to study, it is not for us to just listen and take whatever I am saying, or she is saying, or whoever is here saying. It is for us to listen, to hear, but also to do our own take on that, read more about it, try to figure out more things about it, because we don't have the full truth yet. We're still discovering stuff more and more. The more we study, the more we look for, the more we read, the more we are in contact with these topics, the more we will be able to understand them, and the more we will be able to go deep in them, be it, like she said, in the sexual part, or be it, like Emmanuel said, in the food part of the story, or in what we're going to talk tonight about the limits of the incarnation. So on any topic that we are about, we come to the Spirit Center to hear about it. We need to do our part. It is not just for us to sit there like I did last weekend, for example, when Andre was here, talking, giving a beautiful talk about the Saint Francis prayer. And one thing that caught my eye or my ear when he was saying is that, oh, so for us to start, before we start talking about the prayer of Saint Francis, let's give a background. And then he went and told a little bit of the story of the prayer. So he did a research. He went to look for it. He went to know more about it. So that's our task too. It's our task to know more, to study more, to really be aware of everything that's going on in our lives. Why this introduction? Because um, that's what Spiritism does to things. When usually Kardec start to talk about a topic in the, be it in the Gospel according to Spiritism, be it in the Spirit's book, in the Medium's book, in the Spiritist magazine, anywhere, he doesn't stay only on what people are talking about. He goes after more things to learn. He goes and researches. He goes and talks to people. He goes and asks people about things. And in this specific topic for tonight, which is what are the limits of incarnation, um, what he did was he asked a question. And this question that I'm asking right there, what are the limits of incarnation, was the question that he asked. And it's I put the full text on the board there so that it's not a big text. So we're going to follow slowly to try to understand exactly what he wants to know. But he's not satisfied with just one simple question and one simple answer. He goes and goes and goes and goes until, if he doesn't find the answer to that specific question, he keeps looking for it. He doesn't give up. He keeps pushing it. And we see this on the Spirit's book. We see this on all the books of Spiritism. And then comes Chico Xavier with, for example, this book that Juliana read, the initial message, Our Daily Bread here, and many other books where we find answers, and we find Emmanuel and other spirits answering some questions and giving us some insights on seeing things with a different perspective. So here, Kardec decided, and we are on chapter 4 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, which, depending on the translation for English, this book that I have here has the translation of the chapter saying, "No one can see the kingdom of God unless he is born again." So this chapter of the Gospel according to Spiritism, which is the one that we've been studying for the past maybe 2 months or 2 months and a half almost, talks about what is to reincarnate. What is this idea that Spiritism is not the owner of the idea? Spiritism didn't present this idea of reincarnation. It didn't create this idea of reincarnation. This idea of reincarnation is a very, very old idea. No, the Hindus talk about reincarnation 6,000 years ago, 4,000 years before Jesus. The Jewish people around the time of Jesus, they would talk about reincarnation. And this chapter that Hendrik spoke a few words about it in one or two lectures. Then last month there was Monica who came here to talk to us. Juliana was here too, and she read the initial message too. And now we are reaching the end of the chapter. I'm going to be doing this item 24. Next week, Hendrik will finish the chapter with items 25 and 26. So Spiritism just grabs that idea and sees and searches in Jesus's words. Did Jesus talk about reincarnation? And that's what we saw in the past few months. And if you go online, you can watch the previous talks in English about this topic. And Hendrik gave a wonderful talk here about this, pulling out stuff from the Old Testament, from the New Testament. And so there are a few good lectures talking about this. But then Kardec reaches this point in the book, or in this topic, when he comes to a spirit and say, oh, let me ask you this then. And then that's the question he asks. What is the limit of incarnation? And this is a very open question. What is the limit of this? And then you can say so many different things. And the spirit who answers this question from Kardec, is the spirit of St. Louis. It's written at the end, and I put it there as well at the end. The answer was given in Paris in the year 1859. So Kardec was probably working on improving the questions for the Spirit's book, because if we just given a brief history here, in 1857, the first book of what we call Spiritism was launched, which is the Spirit's book. So, but that first edition of the book had only 500 questions. And today, the book that we have as the Spirit's book has more than 1,000 questions. So it means that from that first edition to when the second edition came out, 3-4 years later, Kardec added almost 600 more questions and answers from the Spirit's book. So he never stopped asking questions. So this in and of itself is a very, it's a teachable moment from Kardec. So he had this book out. 4 years later, he was still improving that book. And then come us sometimes and say, oh no, everything that we need to know is in the Spirit's book. Everything that we need to know is, no, it's not. Like we were saying in the beginning, we need to keep searching. We need to, of course, study the base and be certain that that base is really steady, is a good foundation, like as if we're going to build a house. So we have to have that big base and steady and rock steady foundation so that we can build the walls, and then we can put the roof and everything else. So the Spirit's book and everything that Kardec did is that foundation. But then we can still keep learning. We can still keep asking questions. And once again, that's what he does here. He says, what are the limits of incarnation? Remember, we've been talking about, we are spirits. We are not this body that we have. We are spirits. So when we die, we don't die. The body dies, stays behind, and we go on. We keep living. And we call in Spiritism this area, this moment when we are here alive in the body, we call this moment an incarnation. So it means that when we are alive here, we are incarnated. So we reincarnate because we were dead, quote unquote, and then we took another body, and we grew up to be what we are today. So we are incarnated. But Kardec was curious to ask, so what are the limits of this that we call incarnation? Is there any limit to this? What is the boundary of what we call it incarnation? So this is the question. So what the Spirit of St. Louis answers is as such. The book that I have here is slightly different than what is there. But so I'm going to read it from there. In actual fact, incarnation does not have clearly defined limits if we are thinking only of the envelope which constitutes the physical covering of the spirit, since the materiality of this covering diminishes in proportion as the spirit purifies itself. So let me stop right there, because it has a lot of concepts and we need to clarify a few of those. So, first of all, he's saying, okay, incarnation is not limited by what you see. It is as if we are asking if I don't know if you have dogs or if you had dogs in the past or if you know a little bit about dogs. But if you have a dog and you leave the house for 1 minute and you come back, the dog is unfazed. Nothing happened because it is as if the dog still remembers you. Remember that you just left, so it's very fresh. But if you leave the house for about, I don't know, 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or if you leave the house for 5 hours, when you come back, it is as if the dog had spent the entire day without you. Because his memory, the dog's memory, has a limit to what he can actually see. And if the dog is not seeing it, it is as if it doesn't exist anymore. Kids are like that when they're very young. In psychology, we learned that a kid is playing with something, 2-month baby, 3-month baby. If you're playing with something, and then that something falls, and the baby doesn't see that thing anymore, it thinks that that thing disappeared, doesn't exist anymore. That's one of the reasons why they say that when some babies, and most of them, they start crying really hard when they don't see their mother anymore, because it is as if they don't exist, as if they disappeared, as if they died. And then when you appear, he's all like jumpy, because where does this come from? So that's why. So what is the limit of life for a baby? It's just what the baby sees. What is the limit of life for a dog? It's just what the dog sees. What is the limit of life for us? It's completely different, because we see and we hear and we understand so much more about life that our limit is much bigger than what we actually, a dog or a baby, for example. We can see this in so many different things. Even the 5 senses that we have, our eyes and our ears, for example, right? We are in a car, and the car is all closed, and we have the sound, music, a very loud music, for example, and we see very far away, but with the music being very loud, how much can we hear from the outside? Can I hear as far as I can see? There's something is very far away. I see a mountain. What if a tree falls on that mountain and I see? Will I be able to hear it? Probably not, because that sound is so far away that it cannot reach my ear. So even in our own life, the limits are different for different things in our lives. So what the Spirit is starting to say here is that the limits of what you call incarnation and what you call life are not what you usually think of, because you're referring to something that you can see only. So when I think about this, I remember this idea or this thought process of a person that never saw. A person is discovering water, is discovering like a pond or the sea or a river, right? And then the person is discovering that and puts his head or her head into the water and tries to breathe. What will happen? The person will drown. If the water comes in, the person can die. And the person gets out of there and said, nothing can live there because nothing can breathe underwater. But until the person sees a fish or sees an animal that can live underwater, that can take that water, put inside herself, and take from the water oxygen. One day I saw this report was on a Brazilian television a while ago, that some scientists had devised this liquid that was so full of oxygen in a certain way, that if you survive that gag reflex that of having your lungs all full of something instead of water, instead of air, the lungs are able to get from that liquid the air, the oxygen that it needs. And the person will not drown if the person is inside that liquid. It was kind of weird to think about it. Have yourself all inside of water, or not water, but this special liquid, and be able to live underwater, under this special liquid. So what are the limits of our life? It depends on how we think about it. It depends on, excuse me, it depends on what we consider what life is. So he goes on and he says, if we consider, and in Spiritism, we say that we have our body, which we cannot touch. We have, and we are a spirit that doesn't have a body, that is spiritual, completely spiritual. And for us to connect our body to the spirit, we have something in between that can be connected to the spirit on this end and be connected to the body on this other end. This special type of body in between, we call it the perispirit, which also, only the name is a creation of Spiritism. Paul talks about it. The Hindus talk about it. And lots of other religions talk about it. In Spiritism, we call that body, which some other people, call the spiritual body, or call it the mental body, or call it whatever the name. It doesn't matter. It's this idea that to connect the spirit to the body, we need something that's intermediary. And that's what the spirit here say, that if we are thinking only of the envelope, which he's talking about, this envelope is our body, constitute the physical covering of the spirit, since the materiality of this covering diminishes in proportion as the spirit purifies itself. So he's saying that the more we evolve, the more we grow spiritually, we need less of this physical body that we have right now. Or our material body will not need to be as physical as this. And then he goes on. In certain worlds more advanced than Earth, this covering is already less compact, less heavy, more refined, and consequently less subject to vicissitudes. He's saying, in other worlds, where spirits are more evolved than us here on Earth, in other places, the bodies that we have there are less material than this one. I'm not sure if everybody read the book, but No Solar, for example, right? No Solar is maybe the most read Spiritist book of all time. Almost everybody read that book. But even if you didn't read the book, and if you watched the movie, what do we see in No Solar? We see in No Solar is a full city, a complete city of spirits that are not necessarily incarnated, but they are in this state where the material body is not the same as ours. It has a less, like he says here, to use his words, a less compact, less heavy, more refined, and consequently less subject to everything that we have to bear while here on earth, subject to vicissitudes, which is, if we are already dead, do we need to breathe? Will fire burn me? How am I going to feel cold if I don't have a body? So what he's talking about here is these vicissitudes, is how much hungry I'm going to feel when I'm dead, when I have a body that's less heavy, that needs less material things to survive. So then, when we start thinking about this, we start to think that, okay, so we still have maybe a lot to grow, a lot to evolve, because, we feel hungry all day. Some people feel more hungry than other people, right? We need stuff, need to breathe, we need this, we need that. Our bodies suffer. Then we have pain. When we fall, we have pain. We break bones. We have lots of internal diseases, my organs and cancers and lots of other diseases. What he's saying here is that uh, in these planets or in these worlds where people are more evolved, they don't need to suffer as much as we still need to suffer while we are here. Because we are still going on. We're still in the very beginning of the scale of becoming better spirits. It's like when we think about this and we say, oh, but we feel envy of a person that's not suffering anymore. But do we ask ourselves, what did that person do not to suffer anymore? What has that person suffered before? But we only want to be there, but not want to go through what that person went through. When I was very young, I remember when we were talking about Chico Xavier, I was talking to my dad about it, about him, and about what he is, and I was telling him that I heard on the school that we had in the Spirit Center that I went to when I was a kid, and I guess the teacher there talked about Chico Xavier and what the books that he wrote, and about how nice he was, and about how good he was, and everything that he was able to do to write these books and be good to people. And I told him, oh, I would like to be like Chico Xavier, to write these books, to do these things. And then he looks at me and says, yeah, that would be nice, but would you also want to have all the diseases that he has? Would you like to be to sleep only 3 hours every day? Would you like to? And then he told me a few stories, and if we've watched the movie about his life, or if we read something about Chico Xavier, we will know how tough his life was. Would you want to be like to be like 5, 6, 7 years of age and have your mother, which was not his mother anymore, she had already passed away, but the wife of his dad, or his godmother, that was a very not so good person, to whip him every day? And I said, yeah, maybe not. I don't think I want to be Chico Xavier anymore. That was my answer when I was there. Because we usually want the prize. We usually want to be at the end line, to be the first. But do we really want it? Do we really want to go through all the troubles and all the sacrifices that we need to go to reach that level? Or do I only want the medal? I only want the glory. I only want the good part of it. And of course, that's usually what most of us still want, is the glory, is the final destination. We don't want to go through the hurdles and the problems and the difficulties of what it is. So what St. Louis is telling us is that when we reach that level, when we are able to get to that plane, we will suffer less, because our body will, at least physically, we will suffer less, because our bodies will be not prone to having all these problems that we still have. But we're still a little bit far away from that place. And he goes on, he says, in worlds of still higher elevation. So he talked about worlds more elevated than Earth, and now he's going to talk about of worlds that are even higher. In worlds of still higher elevation, it is translucent and almost fluidic. It dematerializes by degrees and finally becomes absorbed in the perispirit. According to the word that I was mentioning here, perispirit. According to the kind of world in which it lives, the spirit reclothes. So it is as if we're taking one clothing and putting another one, which is different. Itself with a covering appropriate to that world. It is as if we are moving from here to Brazil, to the northeastern part of Brazil, and wearing these clothes. Or going to Alaska with these clothes. We will die of cold in Alaska with these coats, and we will die of hot in Brazil. Because these clothes are not appropriate for extreme weathers. These clothes are appropriate for what we're living right now here. So when we go to a more evolved world, we might think that when we go, for example, let's just create a planet here. This planet will be named Chris. This huge planet. It's called Chris. So we're going to Chris' planet. And we get to that planet and we see nothing. We only see sand and water, if some water, dunes and mountains, and we don't see anything. And we think that that planet has no life in it. But if I get a radio here and turn the radio on, what will I hear? Maybe music, maybe somebody talking. Is that magic? Of course not. There are so many things going through us right now that I cannot see, that I cannot hear, that I cannot feel. But if I put the right equipment, it will be able to capture that. If we go to this planet and we don't see anybody, it doesn't mean that there's no life there. Maybe I just cannot see it, feel it, hear it, because it's not in the same vibration that my machine, my eyes, my ears can hear it. That's what he is saying here. When we evolve and we get to different levels of evolution, we will need different clothing. We will need a different type of body for us to keep growing, because we will not have the need to bear this type of matter, this dense, heavy matter. We will be able to go different places. We will be able to do different things. So it will be appropriate for each place that I'm going, just like as if I'm going to Resplendor, right? I have to have a certain type of clothing to go there. If I go to Rio Grande do Sul, right, I'm going to have to go with different type of clothes. Why? Because it's colder, because it's warm, because every single place in the world has a different type of clothing, and the time of the year as well. Even here, if I am in June, July, or August, I will not be wearing this because it will be so hot that I will die of dehydration probably if I don't drink a lot of water. So St. Louis, start by saying, look, every place that you go, the limits of incarnation might be very different. You may think that that person is dead, but that person might not even be dead. That person may be incarnated, but in a world that only needs that type of perispirit, that type of a body, let's say. And then he goes to explain a little bit about the perispirit, and he says, the perispirit itself undergoes successive transformations. It becomes more and more etheric or etheric until it reaches complete depuration, which is the state of all pure spirits. If special words are destined for more highly advanced spirits, they do not remain prisoners there as in the inferior worlds. The special state of detachment in which they find themselves to travel to any part of the universe to which they may be called on missions. So, and then he comes to this point when he says, look, it's not because you cannot travel far away that other spirits cannot go farther away. So it is as if we imagine this world that we live in 200 years ago. I often, or sometimes I think about this. We complain about everything in our lives, but we complain, for example, that if I need to go to California, it takes 8 hours to get to California? 10 hours, let's say. 6, whatever the number is, right? Can you imagine 200 years ago to get from here to California? Without planes? Can you imagine when Christopher Columbus came from Europe to here? To that, without knowing that if he would be able to reach here before dying, or even if he would know that if he reached here, if he would be able to go back to Europe, to his place. What would go through the mind of a person like that? Leaving one place and not knowing if they're going to return because they might die, because it was very dangerous. Today, we leave home and you don't know if you're going to come back, but imagine at that time. When anything can happen, diseases that you don't have medicine, you don't even have penicillin. So if you get a cut and you don't treat it right away to clean it and remove every little bit of dirt, you might need to have your hand cut just because you just had a small cut on your hand. Because there was no penicillin that would kill the bacteria. How far would we go with a cut in my leg or in my feet or whatever? That's why people died so early. Because there was no medicine that could treat a lot of stuff. So how far would we go? What St. Louis is telling us here is that as time passes, we evolve and we grow better. We start to understand different things. And if we could see how we were when we first started, and of course, we have all seen drawings of people full of hair from head to toe, like monkeys. And now we don't need all that hair anymore. Why? Because we evolved, because we grew. So it will come a point where people say that, for example, we don't need this finger anymore. There's only one thing or two things that we do with this finger. What is it? Nobody wants to say, I know. It's the ear and the nose. That's the only thing that it does. There's nothing else. We can lose this finger and nothing will change in our lives. But if we lose this one, then it's kind of hard, because how am I grabbing stuff without this finger? This finger is the one that really holds it all together. But this finger, people say that we will lose with time because there's no need for it anymore. Like the appendix here, we don't need the appendix anymore. The appendix was used when we used to eat certain types of fast. Now we passed that time. We don't need the appendix anymore. So stuff that we don't need, because we already passed that phase, will go away. St. Louis is telling us here is that everything in our body will go away. Not in a sense that we won't have a body anymore, but that we don't need, we will not have the need anymore for things to be so heavy, so burdensome, so like sticking us to the ground. And then he says here, some people in some worlds, some spirits in other worlds, in more evolved worlds, what they do is they are so light in a way that they can leave that place and go to a different place, like travel to different places without the need of planes and all that stuff. But this is so far away from us that there's no need for us to keep dwelling on it, because he's just explaining to us that this is a natural process. Hopefully, and not only hopefully, but I hope that's soon than later, but we will get to that point one day. But let's move on so we can, we're getting close to the end here. So, and then he said, if we consider incarnation from the material viewpoint, verified here on earth, we can say that this is limited to inferior worlds. So what he's saying here, he's saying that if we see incarnation only here on earth, we can say it that this type of incarnation that we are living here, this is the type of incarnation of inferior worlds, not of the higher realm worlds. Let's think about Jesus, for example. First, before talking about Jesus, let's talk about ourselves. Christiane here is a mother. And I bet a lot of other people that are watching us or later is our mothers or fathers. Once we have a baby, once we have a kid, a daughter or a son, and we start to know that person, the person is growing. Sometimes when I see that kid, I don't even need to talk to the kid to know that there's something wrong. Because I start feeling, recognizing things. Say that we have that sixth sense, that we capture things in the air, that the way he speaks or the way she says something, that I look at him and I say, what are you hiding from me? What did you do wrong? This is our physicality. This is us being with this body, that it's hard for us to notice what other people are feeling or what other people are thinking about. Jesus would come to us, and we have so many examples in the gospel, but with the disciples or the apostles writing the books, he's saying that, and when they came to talk to Jesus, to talk to him, he knew what they wanted to say. He knew what the question is about. How can we know that? And there are people, Chico Xavier, for example, and André, which gave the lecture last Saturday here, he said that at one point. And we have that written in so many books, that Chico Xavier would come to a person, or a person would come to Chico out of nowhere, and then talk to him, and then he would say, oh, how are you? And then say his name or her name. He'd say, I never saw Chico, me personally, I've never been there. Let's say I would go there, and he would say, oh, look, hey, Mackenzie, how are you? And this happened to so many people. There are there in the books people telling these types of stories. And how can he know that? How can he perceive that? How can he hear it or feel it? And those are the things that are hard for us to see, hard for us to understand. But when we start developing these other senses or getting rid of this materiality of ourselves here, we will be able to do stuff that we don't really know that we are able to do. So the limit of what we are for this world here is limited to who we are. And we are still inferior in that sense of we are closer to the beginning than to the end. So it is as if we'd say, if I look at the, let's say, let's think about a very evolved spirit, whoever that spirit is. If that spirit is an adult, we're like in a baby phase. We still have a lot to learn. There's so many things that we don't know. So many things that we think we know, and then like 2 years later said, oh, we didn't know that. We didn't know that. Oh, what is this? What is that? As time passes, we always think that there's going to be no more news, no more new things coming around, and they always keep coming. They keep coming. You know, when I was a kid, I would read like science fiction books, talking about the future, talking about stuff that we would have, and or watching Star Trek or watching a movie, and then we would see like a person talking on this they would call it sometimes a video phone. So the person would dial something, and then the face of the person would appear on the phone, and said, this is going to be awesome. Today is even more awesome than it was in the movies, because we don't have the phone stuck there. We have the phones in our pockets, and we FaceTime people. We are walking and filming. The other person on the other side is listening to what we are saying and watching what we are filming live. Walking, not steady. Not with a physical camera that's right there and doesn't move. No, with our phones, walking and doing that. If we say that to a person that died in 1950, what would that person think? You're crazy. Oh, that will be a reality. That will be true. That will happen. Said, this is crazy. And we don't have any, what is really our limit? So what is the limit? We don't know. It's so much bigger than what we think it is. And then we come to the end of the text, which I told you is not very long. It's 1 page in a book, less than 1 page in the book, actually. He finishes by saying, St. Louis in Paris, 1859, he finishes by saying, we should also consider that in the discarded state, that is to say, in the intervals between bodily existences, remember, we were talking about reincarnation. So when we die, when we leave our body here, we are discarnated. And then we will one day reincarnate again. So between these two states, when I'm alive here, and then I'm alive here with another body in a different existence, we have this period of time in between these incarnations. So that's what he's talking about here. The situation of each spirit depends on the nature of the world to which it is linked by the degree of advancement it has acquired. So it is as if we are in a vacation, let's say. And then we go to a, how do we call it, those when we are on vacation here on Earth, and then the mother or the father is still working, and then it puts his son or her daughter onto these camps. What do you call it?
Summer camp.
Summer camp or something like that, right? So on the summer camp, we are in between, let's say, grade 5 and grade 6, right? And then there are other kids who are between grades 8 and grade 9. The kids, when they are during that period of time of vacation time, they will be separated based on the grades and the activities that they can make, that they can enjoy. Based on what? Based on their level of achievement. So if for sixth graders will be a certain type of activity. For ninth graders, it needs to be a different type of activity. Why? Because of the level of knowledge, because of how advanced I am in that specific level of knowledge. Here, that's what he's saying. When we are in these types of in-between situation, depending on how much I know, depending on what level I am, I will be in a certain place doing different things than other people that know less or know more. So it is a gradual thing. So it is very important for us to understand that nothing in nature jumps completely out of nowhere from one place to another. It's a step-by-step learning process. Sometimes when we accumulate a lot of knowledge, then we might have that boom, oh, I realized it, and then it suddenly feels as if I'm jumping from one place to another, but actually all that knowledge was already inside of me. I just couldn't understand the whole thing pieced together. And then I have that wake up moment, that serendipitous moment. And then I have that realization, oh my God, how didn't I notice this before? And then all of a sudden I know. But it's always a process of learning little by little, one step at a time. Let's learn this before we learn that. Let's learn that before you take the next step. Otherwise, you may not learn properly. So that's what he's saying. We should consider that between these incarnations, we have these spirits, and we will go to different places according to who we are, to what we really are. So what actually he is saying there is that we need to understand that it's not a punishment or a reward by God. If I'm in a good place, it's not because God wants me to be in that good place and he wants to punish the one that's not in a good place. It's because of what we really are. How am I doing? What am I doing with my own life? That's what he's saying there. By the degree of advancement it has acquired. And that's how he finishes. Thus, therefore, in the spiritual world, we are more or less happy, free, or enlightened according to the degree of dematerialization achieved. The place that I'm going to doesn't depend on what Juliana thinks of me. The place where Juliana will go doesn't depend on what I think of what Juliana is. It doesn't, oh, I have a good opinion about you guys here. It doesn't matter my opinion. That's what he's saying there. What matters is, how am I developing myself? What am I inside of myself? What am I doing with the message that I'm listening? What am I practicing? What am I learning and putting to practice? What is my state of doing and understanding and really believing in what I'm learning? And not only the belief, not only the faith in itself, but also the faith that moves mountains. The faith that believes it will happen, but does not keep steady, waiting for it to happen. No, it's the faith that makes me move, the faith that makes me learn, the faith that makes me practice. Otherwise, faith in and of itself doesn't do anything. Oh, I believe this will happen, and then you stay there. Like that kid that one day, his mother would say, he would yell to his mother. He was in his room. His mother was in the kitchen, and he said, "Mom, I'm hungry." And his mother would yell back to him, "Come here and get it." And he would respond, "Oh, I'm not hungry anymore." Sometimes this story reminds me of ourselves, of myself, right? I say that I'm hungry, and the only thing that our father, our mother, is asking us, come get it. And then we say, oh, I'm not hungry anymore. I'm still hungry, but I don't want to move. I don't want to do my part. I want everybody to do what I need to do, not me. And then we complain about it. We complain that we are hungry. Oh, why are you hungry? Oh, it's because, oh, don't you have food? Yeah, I do have food. So why are you hungry? And then we start to make excuses. Oh, because my mom this, because somebody this. And what about you? Why didn't you go get your food? Oh, because I'm tired, because I'm this. And it's always for the others to make, not for us. So this message, despite talking about the limits of incarnation, it has this deep meaning of waking us up for trying to understand that for us to get to those places where we will not suffer anymore, we need to keep working on what we need to do to get to that point. So we can, of course, analyze these topics from so many angles. But to me, at this moment, since we are talking about Jesus' message of transformation, of allowing us in getting to touch ourselves deep within our hearts, I take that St. Louis, by telling all this to us, is inviting us to do our part, to take our words in action. If we want to be more free, more enlightened, more happy, we need to reach a degree of dematerialization that will be part of us when we decide that follow the footsteps, the teachings of these great men around the world, especially following the teachings of Jesus, are worth following, are worth going after, are worth paying attention to become a better person, to become better men and better women. And with this, I would like to thank you for your patience. I would like to invite everyone to read this passage again, to reread this passage, read the next two, which will be for our next talk a month more or less from now, the second Monday of December with Hendrik, when he will come here to talk to us, to close this chapter on reincarnation, teaching us and showing us how important it is for us to have that knowledge so that we can grow and grow and be happier and happier. So thank you once again for your patience. And now we will go to the passage session. Denise is going to invite ones who want to take the passage. It's not mandatory. It's not something that we need to do. But if we're feeling that we need some energies, Denise will help us. And right after that, we will do our final prayer, and we will be able to go back to our splendid homes. Thank you.